Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today I will have with me three guest speakers. Ahmed has joined us, and Khalid Muhammad and Hassan Aslam Shah will join us soon. As you all know, Ahmed Qureshi is a seasoned journalist with 2 decades of experience in Pakistan and the Gulf region. Today I want to talk about two topics that Pakistanis are debating about at the moment. The first one is about absolutely not of our Prime Minister, and the second one is FATF, which we will come to later. On October 23rd, CNN reported that US was nearing a formal agreement to use Pakistan's airspace to carry out military operations in Afghanistan. And just after a few hours, Pakistan Foreign Office responded to this report by saying that no such understanding was in place. But according to Biden administration, Pakistan has expressed a desire to sign a memorandum of understanding in exchange for assistance with its own counterterrorism efforts and help in managing the relationship with India. But in this same report, according to another source in the US, the negotiations are ongoing and the terms of the agreement that have not been finalized and they could still change. Here in Pakistan, though, the spokesperson Foreign Office stressed that Pakistan and the US had long-standing cooperation on issues of regional security and counterterrorism, and the two sides remain engaged in regular consultations. Ahmed, this confusion has risen because in June, Prime Minister Imran Khan had categorically said in an interview that Pakistan would absolutely not allow any bases and use of its territory to the US for any sort of action inside Afghanistan. So my question is, why was this report published in the CNN at this time? And how much truth there is in it, because Pakistan denies it. What do you have to say, Ahmed?
Interesting topic. It's the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. Obviously, is discussed in many different ways and is seen in many different ways in Pakistan. And you can find a very rich culture of discussing how Pakistan should move forward in its relationship with the United States. So, and there's a long history, obviously, and there has been also a history of anti-Americanism in Pakistan for many, many reasons. So it's natural to find many different narratives and hear and listen to many different narratives in Pakistan. So you see reports and you see denial, and you see all these different perspectives. But the fact of the matter is, as of now, the communication between the government of Pakistan and the U.S. government is actually very good, and has only improved after the events in Kabul and the takeover of Taliban. And the proof of that is actually something that Prime Minister Imran Khan himself said in one of his recent interviews. If I recall correctly, that was the interview he gave to a Turkish news channel. I think it was the GRT World, which is the state channel of Turkey. And in that interview, somewhere he was asked about his relationship with President Biden and whether, the famous call that the U.S. president is supposed to make and speak to Prime Minister Imran Khan. And somewhere, and I'm surprised, Qudsiya, not many people have really paid attention to that very short line or statement, whatever you want to call it, that Prime Minister Imran Khan actually gave during that interview, where he very quickly said something to the effect of that we actually do have a good communication going on right now. So the communication between Washington and Islamabad, the communication exists, and it's really very good, and people are meeting each other, and he said it very dismissively. Obviously, the Prime Minister was not effusive. he was not very descriptive, and he did not give much detail. Somehow, whatever he said was more focused on the call that he's supposed to receive from the American president. But somewhere in the middle of that interview, he did refer to the fact that an excellent and solid communication exists right now between Islamabad and Washington. And I personally spoke to a senior official in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Islamabad, the Pakistani Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and this was in September, which was like a month ago or so, and that officer on record actually said that at the moment, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, we have an excellent coordination and communication with the U.S. government, and obviously between the two militaries, the Pakistani and the U.S. military. So just to sum it up, right now, if you want to sift through all the clutter, all the confusion, all the different narratives that you hear, all the different articles and news reports, the fact on the ground right now is that there is a good communication actually right now between Pakistan and the United States on Afghanistan. And yes, there has been some concern. I wouldn't call it tension. There was some concern when during a hearing in the U.S. Congress, some congressmen talked about Pakistan in negative ways, the Pakistani role in Afghanistan. And obviously there was also this bill that was tabled to punish Pakistan or sanction it in some way if Pakistan does not, cooperate in a better way with the U.S., which was tabled obviously by the opponents of the Biden administration, despite some of the concerns. And again, I'm being very careful not to use the word tension. Why? Because the tensions would be between Pakistani government and the Biden administration. And the Biden administration has not said anything that would reflect what some of the U.S. congressmen or congresswomen said during those hearings. So there's a clear distinction. There's concern, but not tension over it. So as it stands right now, the relationship is actually, and the communication is actually robust. And as a journalist, I was asking myself this question: why would Pakistan and the U.S. not have a good communication and relationship right now, when actually even the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban obviously, in Kabul, have a good working relationship with the U.S. government? Not only a good working relationship with the U.S. government, but in fact the U.S. military, the ground, just before their final departure from Afghanistan and from Kabul, on the ground they were working side by side with Taliban soldiers to secure the airport, obviously, and on other security matters. And even now, even after that, when CIA director visited Kabul and became the first, actually, such a senior official, international official, to visit Kabul and meet with Taliban leadership, why wouldn't, if Taliban can have that good communication despite differences on a number of things, for example, the Taliban have differences over the frozen Afghan assets in U.S. banks and so forth, but despite all of that, they do have a very good communication with the U.S. government. So if they can have that, it is inconceivable that Islamabad and Washington would not have a working relationship, good communication, a good understanding right now. And just before I conclude, the last sign, or a last sign of a good working Pakistani-American relationship is just happened 3 or 4 hours ago when the special U.S. presidential envoy, John Kerry, who is very close, obviously, to President Biden, met in Riyadh with Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan. And it was a bilateral meeting on the sideline of the international event that is taking place in Riyadh. So this bilateral meeting between the presidential representative of President Biden and the Pakistani Prime Minister is the latest example that there is good communication underway right now between Pakistan and the United States.
Right. So you are saying that Prime Minister Imran Khan on Turkish TV said that we have good communication with the US, and but somehow this thing did not get enough notice in Pakistan. Okay, and who is meeting who in the is in Saudi? Someone is meeting the Prime Minister from Biden's team. This is what you are saying?
John Kerry met Prime Minister Imran Khan 4 hours ago in Riyadh.
Okay, so what could have been the agenda of the meeting?
It was just a goodwill meeting. It was the first meeting between John Kerry and Prime Minister Imran Khan. John Kerry is, of course, is looking after climate issues for President Biden. What I meant to say is that relationship and a close relationship and communication right now between Islamabad and Washington. I hope you can hear me because I can hear myself. I can hear an echo.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So John Kerry's meeting is a very senior. He's a representative of President Biden. For him to meet Prime Minister Imran Khan, and Prime Minister Imran Khan is one of the first, actually, world leaders that John Kerry met in Riyadh on the sidelines of the international conference, the Green Middle East Initiative that is taking place in Riyadh. This meeting is the latest sign of this good communication, actually, between Islamabad and Washington.
Right. So you're saying this is a good sign, but we still do not have any clarity on whether we are going to give airspace to the US for operations inside Afghanistan, because
let me say something about this, Qudsiya. I forgot to actually come to this point. Okay, just very quickly about the alleged current negotiations for U.S. military to use Pakistan facilities to look after Afghanistan. The statement made by the Pakistani Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if you read it carefully, it says that as of now, we do not have a new agreement. And that's all that the Pakistani statement says. It does not deny that there are possibly negotiations taking place right now in the background. It does not deny that. It does not also say that we will not or cannot have an agreement in future. It only says that as of now, there is no agreement for use of Pakistani facilities by U.S. military. And that's all that the statement says. And that's a very accurate thing to say. Obviously, there is no new agreement. There is an old agreement for use of Pakistani airspace. Obviously, it was signed in a different time. That circumstance has changed. There is a need now for a new understanding. And there are growing reports and a lot of chatter that, yes, Pakistan and the United States are negotiating a new agreement. It makes sense, and Pakistan should actually do it as well, because we have the largest and biggest stake in Afghanistan. We are the ones who actually, the U.S. was completely planning to abandon Afghanistan. Partially, it goes to the credit of Pakistan and to the credit of, in particular, two people, the National Security Advisor, Dr. Muhid Yusuf, and also the former spy chief, that they traveled to Washington, D.C. and spent time there and convinced the U.S. administration that it should not completely abandon Afghanistan, and Pakistan will cooperate with the United States, keeping the interests of both countries, not just the U.S., but also the Pakistani interest, and factor it in any future agreement between Pakistan and the U.S. on Afghanistan, on use of Pakistani facilities. So I think, Qudsiya, by what I refer to as the statement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is very specific. It does not exclude a future agreement, and it does not deny that it does not confirm, but it also does not deny that there is possibly some negotiation taking place in the background. It only says that as of now, there is no agreement, and that's a correct statement to say. So I think it is, I tend to agree with the assessment that yes, there is a negotiation taking place right now, and Pakistan is very keen, and it's only natural to understand this, that Pakistan would be very keen to sort of ensure that America does not completely abandon Afghanistan, and to ensure and make sure that America doesn't do that, I think Pakistan would be looking at some ways to facilitate the U.S. military. At the same time, Pakistan would, if there is an agreement, Pakistan would definitely secure its core interests, and there are many of them.
Okay, that's good to hear that Pakistan will secure its core interests, and only that action will be taken, which will be mutually beneficial for both the countries. But Ahmed, how do you see, how is it going to affect Pakistan-Taliban relations? If we have, you're saying that the negotiations are underway and the final agreement has not been reached, but if and when we reach such an agreement, that we allow the US to use our airspace for operations inside Afghanistan, how do you see the Afghan Taliban reacting on this development?
There's a short answer for this, Qudsiya. If the Afghan Taliban and the US military and intelligence can work jointly against ISIS, surely the Afghan Taliban will have no problem in Pakistan doing the same. That's the short answer.
Right. Okay, Hassan Mashhadi has joined us, and I want everyone to know that he is the first Pakistani representing Pakistan at International Criminal Court. And he has been advising the Prime Minister on legal aspects of Kashmir issue. And he's also been working for proper media setup and legal system in Pakistan. Thank you for joining us, Hassan.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to finally join Twitter Spaces, which for a tech dinosaur like me was a big challenge.
Okay, it's your first Twitter Space today?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. We have been talking about Pakistan giving airspace to the US. You want to comment on this, or should I talk to you about FATF?
No, that's fine. I'll just share my comments. The news that we've been hearing in the media about US and Pakistan reaching a possible agreement in relation to the use of airspace. Now, I do agree with some of the points that Ahmed has made. Allow me to just give my thoughts on the nature of the relationship between the US and Pakistan at the moment. Now, you see, historically, US and Pakistan have had a very transactional relationship, and one of the biggest casualties of this relationship has been mutual trust. So if you ask any US think tank, the first thing they would, in relation to Taliban, the first party they would blame would be Pakistan. And if you ask a Pakistani bureaucrat or a Pakistani official from the establishment, he would blame the US for abandoning Pakistan after the exodus of the Soviets. So the mutual distrust between the two parties is like a common theme across both sides. It is in light of this historic relationship between the parties that Pakistan and US are now looking at whatever they can do to salvage the relationship after the Taliban took over in Afghanistan. Pakistan finds itself in a very difficult position at the moment because the US and India and some Western countries have given Pakistan the tag of the enablers of Taliban in Afghanistan. And this preconceived notion that attaches to Pakistan has been the reason why the West, in particular, the US, has been reluctant to engage Pakistan. To the extent that the relationship is getting better, I agree with Ahmed, but I don't see this relationship going much further, I foresee it remaining largely transactional because Pakistan has, for the first time, taken a very bold and a very unequivocal stance towards the US by telling the US that, absolutely not. We are not going to give you the airspace. Now, this has visibly irked the US, and this is possibly the reason why we have not seen President John F. Kerry call Prime Minister Imran Khan so far. Now, having said that, now this is the nature of the relationship as it stands today. But on the other hand, Pakistan also realizes that US is a gorilla in the room that you can't ignore. So at some level, Pakistan has to engage with the US because the US holds the purse strings when it comes to the IMF. The US has, a significant clout when it comes to international financial markets. The US is still, one of the largest supplier of sophisticated technology. China is an upcoming country in terms of its superpower status, in terms of its financial wherewithal and all those things, but still it is some distance away from the US. So Pakistan has no choice but to engage with the US at some level. And this possibly explains why we are hearing news about some exchange taking place between US and Pakistan in relation to either the airspace or for carrying out military or intelligence operations in Afghanistan. But I don't think it is going to be possible for Pakistan to backtrack on the promise that has been made by the Prime Minister in the form of the word that we heard. Absolutely not. So Pakistan will perhaps provide the US some intelligence assistance, some sort of assistance that will enable the US to keep an eye on Afghanistan, but I do not feel that Pakistan is going to allow the US to carry out any military operations in Afghanistan. Now, it is also possible that this news in CNN has been intentionally floated by some adverse party just to create more chaos and confusion, because Pakistan is already under pressure. So whenever you hear any news like this on CNN, which says that the Prime Minister or Pakistan is agreeing or is in discussions with the US to give air bases, then the logical consequence of that is that it gives rise to more instability and confusion in the country. So I do keep that angle in my mind also whenever I hear any such news. But on the whole, my view is that Pakistan and US's relationship is going to remain largely transactional. It is not going to get any better. The only thing that Pakistan would be trying to do is to manage the relationship and to somehow keep some lines of communication going between the US and Pakistan, because Pakistan will be needing the US, and the US, on the other hand, would of course be requiring Pakistan at a bare minimum level to engage with the Taliban, to play some sort of a role in post-conflict Afghanistan when it comes to taking care of the refugees and the nation-building activities that are going to take place in Afghanistan. And of course, the US would also be wary of the fact that Russia and China now foresee a larger role in Afghanistan. So these three being traditional foes, or Russia and China now being the foes for the US would want to keep an eye on them. But to some, I don't think this relationship will blossom. I think this relationship will remain a very transactional relationship between the countries going forward.
I completely agree with you that reports like these that was published by CNN, they gave rise to more instability and confusion. And when you're talking about transactional relation, I also agree with that. And especially considering that we are improving our ties, our relations with China and Russia, and maybe that is a red light for the US. Now I received a question from an Afghan, and if any one of you would like to answer this question, this is someone, Abdul Rahman, and he's saying that Pakistan allowed the US drones and B-52 to fly through Pakistani airspace for surveillance on Afghan soil. Many people witnessed these planes on Friday. I don't understand. I think it's impossible to identify a B-52 at night flying so high. So what do you have to say to this? Ahmed, do you take this question?
Yeah, well, this is, just as you said, very difficult to confirm whether these are flown. These are actually B-52s, and whether they're flown from Pakistan or they have anything to do with Pakistan, because we do have a huge American military presence around this region, and it's not very difficult to foresee such flights and over-the-horizon access, as the U.S. military now refers to these sort of flights. It's not unusual, but for them to be flown from Pakistan right now would not be possible, because the current agreement is only to provide the United States certain air corridors, and those are mostly over the Pakistani province of Balochistan, and they connect basically the U.S. military presence in the Arabian Sea and in the Gulf, specifically from Al Udeid base in Qatar, and that's how the U.S. is probably managing right now. If obviously none of us can really confirm whether B-52s are there actually flying right now over Afghanistan. I haven't seen any confirmed report, news report, or a statement from the U.S. military saying that they have flown B-52s recently. But if they have, it's certainly and definitely not from Pakistani bases. That's for sure. Yes, it would be, not would be, but could be through Pakistani airspace, because we do have in Pakistan right now the existing agreement from 2001 allowing the U.S. to use air corridors over Balochistan into the Arabian Sea. So B-52s flying from Pakistan is definitely not possible right now. And B-52 is really huge planes. If they were really flying from Pakistan, that cannot remain a secret.
This shows us the misinformation that is spread on the social media, and these people claiming to be Afghan, who knows who they are, and is spreading this incorrect information. And Hassan, now I want to come to you regarding FATF and the games that I would call them games that it is playing with Pakistan. This week on 21st October, FATF decided to retain Pakistan in its grey list, although we have already complied with 30 of the 34 recommended items. And in contrast, if you look to France, which is home to FATF's headquarters, the non-compliance ratio of France is 25%, but FATF has turned a blind eye. And we here in Pakistan, we have been observing for a long time that FATF is being used as a political tool to serve the vested interests of some countries. And the recent enlistment of Turkey in the grey list has proven that claim. If you remember, on 19th July this year, the Indian External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, he had said that due to us, Pakistan is under the lens of FATF, and it was kept in the grey list. To which our Pakistan's foreign minister had responded by saying that manipulating an important technical forum for narrow political designs against Pakistan is disgraceful, but not surprising for the Modi government. So Hassan, my question to you is, how much more should Pakistan pander to the FATF? Is it of any real benefit to Pakistan in the long run?
Right. So Qudsiya, allow me to just give you a little bit of a background on FATF, why Pakistan landed on FATF in the first place, and why it has not been able to exit the grey list. So firstly, let me admit that FATF's decision to grey list Pakistan in June 2018 was, in my view, and this is a big statement I'm making, which perhaps may not go down well with other people, was the right decision, because Pakistan had been caught napping when it came to international compliance. And the reason behind Pakistan falling foul of FATF's requirements was the failure of the previous established governments to take FATF requirements seriously. Um, Pakistan did not have an adequate legislative framework to mirror the obligations of FATF, as a result of which, in June 2018, FATF placed Pakistan on the grey list. Now, this is part one. So, as I said, the FATF decision to put Pakistan in the grey list was partly the failure of Pakistan to get its own house in order. Now, after Pakistan was placed on the FATF grey list, FATF conducted a number of plenaries in which it reviewed Pakistan's progress. So Pakistan was given a wish list of requirements. Pakistan was told to fulfill those requirements. Initially, Pakistan was slow to realize the seriousness of FATF and how it works as an international system. Later, when Pakistan realized the seriousness, more specifically the fact that failure to comply with FATF obligations would have serious repercussions for Pakistan's economy, the government sprung into action. It constituted various bodies. It ordered various ministries to collaborate and to start complying with the FATF requirements, enacting legislation, and all those things. Now, lately, in the last 1.5 years, Pakistan has taken significant steps to comply with FATF requirements, which is evident from the fact that Pakistan is reported to have fulfilled 26 out of 27 FATF action points. Now, the problem that has arisen is that despite Pakistan's hard work, which, as I admitted earlier, was started a bit late, Pakistan is not being let off the hook. Now, this is why when I say that Pakistan was wrong or Pakistan was slow to realize the seriousness, at the same time, after having observed the last 1.5 years on how Pakistan has been treated by FATF, I have come to the conclusion that unfortunately, FATF is not just international law and international rules. FATF is a lot more than that. And FATF is one of those international institutions. So I'll quickly tell you the point I made. I said that initially Pakistan landed on the FATF grey list because it did not have its house in order. It woke up late to comply with the FATF obligations, but in the last 1.5 years, Pakistan has made significant strides, significant progress to comply with FATF requirements. Pakistan has been given a new wish list every time Pakistan has gone to FATF in the last 1.5 years. And if you look at the last 2 years, you can claim that Pakistan is being victimized, Pakistan is being scapegoated. And this is why after having studied the FATF laws and the recent geopolitical developments that we see happening around us, I have concluded that Pakistan is being victimized, Pakistan is being scapegoated, and there is a visible arm twisting that is taking place because Pakistan is not doing the West line. Now, some of the recent events that have happened in Pakistan's neighborhood, namely the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, has further deepened the distrust between Pakistan and the West. As a result of which Pakistan is being kept on the FATF grey list, and despite having done all the hard work, I don't foresee Pakistan coming off the grey list. Now, one sticking point between FATF and Pakistan remains terrorism and terrorist financing. And this is where both Pakistan and FATF are unable to have a meeting of minds. So Pakistan claims to have enacted legislation to counter terrorism, to have taken substantial steps to curb terrorist financing, but FATF insists that Pakistan must demonstrate compliance. Now, when you say demonstrate compliance, that becomes a difficult situation for Pakistan because then it becomes subjective. Now, what does it mean to demonstrate compliance? What does it mean to ensure that extra jurisdictional steps would be taken by Pakistan? So this is where I feel that Pakistan is being victimized, Pakistan is being honored. But having said all this, I do believe that Pakistan has no choice but to play by the rules of the game. There are certain situations thrust upon a person or a country which one has to live with, and one has to learn to get out of it through hard work, through tact, through its allies, its support. So Pakistan will have to, unfortunately, expect to stay in the grey list for a while and to make efforts to exit the grey list through further efforts.
Okay, so what I gather from you is that you don't see Pakistan coming off the grey list soon. And the major issues that the FATF is having is number one is counterterrorism, and the second one is terrorism financing. So, and they want us to demonstrate compliance, but we don't know how to do that, or that's it's not very clear how to do that.
You see, Qudsiya, FATF is not just an international institution, it's an intergovernmental organization. Think of it like a bucket of to-do things. It's not just one central institution which has, a top-down lawmaking capacity. FATF is a conglomerate. It's a combination of different institutions that have come together. The teeth or the power that FATF derives is from two United Nations Security Council resolutions, which are in relation to combating financing and terrorism, one of which was passed in the aftermath of 9/11 attacks. So that is where, it becomes tricky, because you see, law or language can be used in multifarious ways. If somebody wants to apply a law which is very subjective, very generic, then, and the onus of proving compliance is also on the party that is in the docket or which is being tried, then it becomes very difficult for the party to convince that it has fulfilled the requirements. So I do, and I do feel now, after having studied FATF, after having written extensively on it, that FATF is being the judge, the jury, and the executioner here. It's becoming absurd now, because, where you had to blame Pakistan, you can blame Pakistan. But as I said earlier, if you look at the progress that Pakistan has made, the remarkable progress that Pakistan has made in the last 1.5 years, I see absolutely no reason for Pakistan to be put in the FATF grey list. And let me say this, if money laundering and terrorism financing is indeed the touchstone, or the on the basis of which you will determine culpability, then we are all aware of British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, which are tax havens. Even Western countries like UK. I mean, London is known to be a hub of ill-gotten wealth. Billions and billions of dollars are parked there. If we were to have some transparency, then perhaps together with Pakistan, we would also be putting countries like UK, Cayman Islands, British, BVI in the FATF grey list. But because we don't have transparency, we have a selective application of rules, we have a bias, therefore we are putting Pakistan, and we are making sure that Pakistan stays there. And lastly, I'll conclude, by saying that there are parallels between Pakistan and Turkey, and you would have seen that Turkey has also been placed on the FATF grey list lately. And, if you look at the geopolitical developments that are happening these days, Turkey is having strained relations with the EU. The F-35 deal between the US and Turkey has gotten cancelled because of Turkey's decision to buy the S-400 system from Russia. Turkey is on the opposite side in the conflict in Libya against some of its Western allies. Then President Erdogan has decided to expel 10 ambassadors of EU country members who had opposed the jailing of one of the activists in Turkey. So my question is, why is Turkey put in the grey list when all these things are happening? It cannot be a mere coincidence that Turkey is put in the grey list just when Turkey's relationship with the West is getting strained. So it does feel to any sane person in today's time and age that Turkey is now the weapon of choice to wage a war against countries that you deem non-compliant. You basically want to bludgeon countries into submission. You want to coerce them. This is basically coercion. It's the sophisticated manner in which international institutions are used to coerce countries, to make them toe a certain line, to make them do certain things. So this is where, law, as I said earlier, has been corroded. It has been tarnished by politics. And if we continue down this road, then, we will see more Muslim countries perhaps becoming the target of FATF. We already have Iran on the blacklist. We have Pakistan on the grey list since 2018. And now we have Turkey on the grey list. And, looking at the way things are going, don't be surprised if more countries are added to the grey list, because if you cannot emasculate your enemy through bombs and weapons, then the best way to do it in today's time and age is through these kind of tactics, namely to choke their lifeline, their economy.
Brilliant points by you, Hassan. Thank you. Ahmed, I also want to know your opinion. Do you see a certain bias in FATF's grey listing of Pakistan, and now they have also added Turkey to the grey list?
Right, Qudsiya, my take actually is very different on this, and unfortunately, I have a very harsh view of the way all of this is being handled. Actually,
Okay.
there could be bias for sure. It's not unheard of that international forums are manipulated by certain strong countries within those forums for certain political objectives. It's not unheard of. We in Pakistan have been using the platform of the OIC and the Kashmir Contact Group for many, many years against India, and we have done it successfully. And the Indian government has been accusing the OIC of bias, of pandering to Pakistani position, of taking Pakistan's side, and so forth. And we've been doing that, and we've been doing that successfully. And there are a number of there's a long list of examples that one can invoke to show that if you are in an organization and you can lobby and manipulate, you can obviously use the objective laws of that forum or organization for other objectives that have nothing to do with the objectives of that forum, for other political reasons or geostrategic reasons. So that's unheard of. It's not unheard of, I'm sorry. So it could be, yes, that it's biased, but the fact of the matter is that when OIC or the contact group on Kashmir condemns India or Indian human rights violations in Kashmir, there might be bias in that, but it's also doing it for subjective reasons. There's a certain standard by which India is being measured in Kashmir, and if it falls short, India is being censured, and the OIC or the contact group has been doing that for many, many years. So it's not complete bias. The same, I would use the same analogy for the FATF, the FATF. Yes, it is possible. It is possible that it's being misused. I will not give Indian diplomacy the credit of manipulating FATF. I have seen no evidence that shows that Indian diplomacy is India is a huge country. It has certain clout commensurate with its size and interest and reach internationally, but it does not. It stretches the imagination to say that it has the ability to manipulate some very, very important countries that are part of the FATF process and processes. And so it could be that other countries are biased probably or have other geostrategic interests, yes, and they could manipulate this forum. Very much possible, happens everywhere. But the fact is that there are subjective laws and criteria by which Pakistan is being faced with this situation. And partially Hassan also alluded to that when he said that we were late in Pakistan actually to pay attention to this and move. And we've moved a lot in the last couple of years. But the fact of the matter is that Pakistan, and we have to admit this, we do have a problem of reputation, and we have a problem of credibility. And there's a history of us taking action on some of the things that we have taken action on in the last couple of years. And by the way, and I agree with Hassan, what Pakistan has done in the last couple of years with regards to the requirements by the FATF is remarkable. What Pakistan has done in a very short time, remarkable, very difficult for any government to do, for any country, and Pakistan did that to a large extent. But the problem of reputation and credibility comes in when somebody invokes the question of Pakistan, previous governments in Pakistan in previous years taking similar actions, maybe not in the way that was done in the last couple of years in one go, but some of these laws individually were implemented or introduced, or some actions were taken in years before under other governments, previous governments in Pakistan, and then the situation went, and Pakistan basically relapsed, and developments happened within Pakistani politics. Maybe the governments were dismissed, were completed their terms, other parties came to power. Whatever happened, or usual Pakistani chaotic politics came in between. But the net result was that action taken by Pakistan, by those governments in the past in Pakistan, was undone. And so we developed a reputation that somehow we do not have consistency. And that could be one of the reasons why the FATF is being very stern this time. They want, there could be bias. Somebody could be playing foul, using the FATF really to pressure us for other things. But another reason that is given is that we want to ensure that this time the Pakistani government would not relapse. Pakistan will not relapse on these commitments, and these should be solid, and there should not be a back and forth on them in the future. But then again, you could counter and say, but Ahmed, we're doing a good job in the last 2 years. Yes, we are, but then we have another problem. We have very bad when it comes to arguing our case internationally, in the media. You know, it's all about the impressions you create. And the impressions we create are not very, how should I say, not very solid, not very good. We are mostly found wanting in conveying our position internationally. So we've done a great job, for example, in the last 2 years. I do not remember or recall seeing any exceptional effort by the government of Pakistan to promote what internationally, and to promote understanding of what it has done in the last 2 years with regards to FATF requirements. I haven't seen that. Yes, I have seen a couple of Pakistani think tanks that have done impressive work in analyzing the requirements of the FATF in recent rounds, and what they expect from Pakistan, and what Pakistan has done to meet those requirements. Impressive work by some of these think tanks. But again, these are think tanks with limited resources doing their work within their own domain. The government of Pakistan remains lacking and very, very weak in promoting internationally the good work that the government of Pakistan has done in the last 2 years with regards to meeting the requirements of the FATF. So that's one very important thing. The fact that we've done some good work, progress, but we're not promoting it internationally. The government of Pakistan, the state of Pakistan is very weak when it comes to media projection and projecting its own positive work, number one. Number two, you can often see that even when we do good work, instead of promoting that good work, we prefer to, I don't know how should I put this? We prefer to cry foul. We prefer to say, and I see this happening now, a narrative is being developed that this is being done to target certain Muslim countries. And two countries were mentioned, Turkey and Iran. I think Hassan just mentioned Iran as well, and he mentioned Turkey. There's also the UAE. The UAE and the authorities in Dubai are also under watch by the FATF, and they face the prospect of in the future of being grey-listed. There's a possibility, and there are serious reservations by the FATF on certain laws in the United Arab Emirates, and of course Iran is there for a long time. Turkey is recently there. But I do not see any of these three Muslim countries, the UAE, Iran, or Turkey, accusing the FATF of victimizing Muslims. I don't see that. What I see, actually, Turkey has been added recently, so they're yet to really respond. We're yet to see their full response and detailed response. But Iran and the UAE, for example, have been positively engaging with the FATF, and they do an excellent job. Iran, of course, has another problem. It's linked with so many other things, so Iran is a very complicated situation. But because the financing is linked to a number of proxy militias and so forth, it's a very complicated issue. But the UAE, for example, is also positively engaging. And Iran is also, by the way, positively engaging the FATF. And they're trying to gradually convince the FATF on certain points. And they've succeeded on some points. And some other points remain very, very difficult, obviously. So I don't see Iran, for example, and I don't see the UAE, and even Turkey now, accusing the FATF of targeting Muslims. In fact, they're engaging the FATF on the subjective and objective reasons or standard views to engage with these countries. And that would be the best way to move forward. Obviously, no one can stop us in Pakistan if we want to say that the FATF is being unfair to us. We can say that, obviously. We have all the right to do that and say that. It's true, but that cannot be a strategy. That's not a strategy. See, if I were to be very realistic and say, what can we do now to get out of this FATF cycle? And if somebody comes up to me and says, well, I think one strategy would be to develop a narrative that says FATF is targeting Muslim countries, number one, and number two, FATF is being biased, and number three, it's a tool for imperialism. Very nice. This narrative would be a hit with the leftists. It would be a hit with the right-wing people, but it does not solve the problem. It is not a strategy to solve a problem. If it were, I would have seen Iran following it. It has not. Iran has followed a very mature line, a very, very mature line, actually. I haven't seen the UAE follow it. They're using a very mature line. And by the way, these countries are also using their soft power. So Iran has an excellent relationship with European countries, thanks in part to the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. And it's using many of the good offices and good relationships it has, not just with the EU, but also with some important Asian countries like Japan, like South Korea, and some others. It's using those relationships as well, and using the soft power. The same thing is being done by the UAE. It has issues, some very serious issues in its financial system in the United Arab Emirates, but it's trying to deal positively with that, trying to move forward on the requirements of the FATF, but at the same time, it's also using its soft power as a responsible country and so forth. For us in Pakistan to develop a narrative, a strategy to deal with the FATF based on the 3 points of targeting Muslims or Muslim countries, number one, number two, being biased, and number three, something else. It's very nice, it's good, we can do it, fine, nobody can stop us, but that's not a strategy. The strategy would be to improve. Why not invest that time, which we are investing right now, in crying foul and claiming that Muslim countries are being targeted? Why not invest that time actually in promoting the good work that we've done in the last 2 years? I do not see as much effort invested by the people in power, in government, in Islamabad, in promoting the really impressive progress that Pakistan has made with regards to FATF in the last 2 years. If the government is not going to promote that, and it's not enough to hold press conferences that go for a couple of hours in Islamabad with no projectors and screens and short briefs and so forth, and actual lobbying internationally. If you're not going to do that, I can't see how the world is supposed to get to know the superb work that really was done in the last 2 years. So instead of wasting so much or investing so much energy in a narrative that frankly even Muslim countries do not buy, Iran doesn't, Turkey doesn't, the UAE doesn't, we're developing a narrative that nobody would buy, and it's not a strategy to solve the problem. It's better that we invest in promoting the excellent work that we've done. And obviously, I have no evidence that the FATF is linked to our position in Afghanistan or anything else, but this is the international system, and this is how it works. Countries lobby, countries use different platforms to hit on other countries, and this is how geostrategy is executed. Everybody does it. Nobody stops us from doing that as well. We should do it as well, and we should play. If we are negotiating overflight rights with the United States for Afghanistan, we can include U.S. support for Pakistan in exchange at a forum like the FATF, for example. Yes. And in conclusion, the very last line, I will not give credit to Indian diplomacy for whatever is happening in FATF. I do not think they have that kind of clout. India is an important country, but I'm sure even Indian diplomats would agree that they do not have that kind of clout. I mean, to quote a statement by one Indian official who claims that it's thanks to India that whatever Pakistan is facing, it's really thanks to India. It's stretching the imagination. I can find and list a dozen or 24 other statements made by Indian ministers taking credit for so many things with regards to Pakistan that actually are not true or false or incorrect. So basically, that really sums up really my position.
Right. So I think this is also a positive approach that you're saying that we should look inwards and improve ourselves. Basically, you talked about two issues that we are facing. First one is about the credibility and reputation of Pakistan. That is why we're facing problems. And secondly, you said that we are not promoting our progress that we made internationally, right? Okay. Ahmed, now.
Just to be blunt. I mean, I've seen the Prime Minister, for example, instead of using 3 consecutive international interviews to talk about women's clothing, I think it would have been much better to talk about the progress we've made on FATF. So it's not many Pakistani officials and leaders get a chance to speak to the international audience. So if we have 3 consecutive international interviews that could have been used to speak about Pakistan's progress on FATF, and they were instead wasted by talking about women's clothing, I think that's a misappropriation by us of an important asset and platform to promote our position. It's one silly example. I would be the first to admit, Qudsiya, it's a silly example, but it's an indicative example. It's a good example of how we waste opportunities to really promote the good work that the government of Pakistan has done, for example, with regards to the FATF. There are many, many other platforms as well where this can be done. It is not being done. It should be. I think that would be much better for us in dealing with the FATF than investing energies into developing a narrative that is really targeting Muslim countries and so forth, which is good for newspaper articles and speeches at Munshi Gate, which is, for those who don't know, a place in the city of Lahore, Pakistan's second largest city. It's good where mostly political rallies are held. So it's good really for political rallies at Munshi Gate to say that FATF is really targeting Muslim countries, but it's really not a strategy to solve the problem.
Right. So basically, yes, you're saying that the people in power, like a prime minister, should be careful when they are talking at international forums, and they should formulate their speeches, think beforehand. Okay, Ahmed, I have a question for you from Fawad Ali, and he's asking that in the last 3 or 4 months, Prime Minister Imran Khan refused to personally meet with some US officials, including the CIA chief. So what has happened now that he has met in a third country with Biden's special representative. Is it that Pakistan has failed to stand up for absolutely not notion? If so, then what could be the reaction from both Pakistan and Taliban regime? And what could be the possible impact outcome on Pakistan and the region?
The short answer, Qudsiya and Fuad, is that absolutely not is not diplomacy. I mean, absolutely not is a political position taken by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I personally, as a journalist and as a political analyst, would see it as more political than diplomatic. It's a great statement when it comes to politics. It helps the Prime Minister politically. It helps his government. He might have certain diplomatic ideas that he would like to pursue with regards to absolutely not. It's a very strong political line that can be controversial, positive and negative, could help him in some ways. So I see it as political, but it's not diplomacy. There is no such thing as absolutely not in diplomacy anywhere. Diplomacy is the art of the possible, and doors are open for anything and everything in diplomacy. I think it would be unwise for anyone to think that the Prime Minister's absolutely not line is a line in the sand that cannot be changed. It is not, because that's not how diplomacy works. Nobody can predict the future. Right now, the U.S. president is refusing or declining or does not want to make a telephone call to the Pakistani Prime Minister. But a couple of years ago, another U.S. president was all buddies with the Pakistani Prime Minister and gave him an unprecedented welcome in the White House, which was not given to any Pakistani Prime Minister in the past 50 years, maybe with the exception of, to a certain extent, Benazir Bhutto, and to some extent, President Musharraf. But no one else really got that kind of reception that Imran Khan received by President Trump. I would even say that Imran Khan received even warmer reception in Washington, D.C. that even President Musharraf was received. The only exception then would be Benazir Bhutto. She really received a warm welcome. And maybe if you go 60 years ago, maybe another president from another era, President Ayub Khan. So the point is, absolutely not is a political line. The Prime Minister used it very smartly, very intelligently. He drew political mileage from it, whatever that mileage is. Maybe diplomatic, maybe political. But in diplomacy, there's no such thing as absolutely not. That's not what diplomacy is. So, and there are 1,000 examples of even enemies, and Pakistan and the U.S. are not enemies. But there are 1,000 examples, recent examples of enemies secretly, if not publicly, even secretly talking to each other, despite the absolutely not in public. So keeping that in mind, obviously the John Kerry meeting in Riyadh is a negation of the absolutely not. So the Prime Minister was not meeting the CIA or refused to meet the CIA chief when he visited Islamabad, and other Pakistani officials met him. For the Prime Minister to now meet President Biden's point man for climate change and a presidential envoy directly representing President Biden is a clear sign, even if no statement comes out from the Prime Minister's office to this regard, but this is a clear sign of engagement. And a cabinet minister in the U.S. government, he's a direct representative of President Biden. Do not also exclude the possibility that the Saudi government might be trying to help improve Prime Minister Imran Khan's relationship with the United States. The Saudis have done that back in 2018 and 19 In fact, the meeting between Prime Minister Imran Khan and President Trump in the White House was partially mediated by the Saudis. So it's not unusual. But definitely the meeting, John Kerry with Prime Minister Imran Khan, is definitely a step forward from the absolutely not state. It's a step forward. And I personally have no doubt that if the negotiations, the back channel contacts and talks move forward, that we will see us moving ahead. And let me also say here that there are many countries in this region that would like to see Pakistan and the United States go to war over Afghanistan. There are many countries. There are countries who would love for nothing more than to see perpetual instability in Afghanistan because it will keep Pakistan as a boiling pot. And the only way to keep Afghanistan boiling is to create a mess, and the best way to create a mess is to keep Pakistan and the United States fighting. For Pakistan and the United States to continue fighting and bickering over Afghanistan the way they've been doing for 2 decades means a net loss for U.S. strategic interests in this region, for Pakistani strategic interests in this region, and definitely the interest of the Afghan people, who will be the worst hit by this continuous back and forth disturbed relationship between Pakistan and the United States. And there are other countries in the region who would love to see that continue. They would be more than happy to see Pakistan inflex, to see Afghanistan boiling, and to see Americans keep beating their heads on the wall and not getting anywhere. So it's a net loss really for everyone. And I think it's time. I think the Pakistani government has done a good job of re-engaging the U.S. government after the fall of Kabul, after the Taliban takeover, and they've done a good job of convincing the Biden administration that it is in America's interest not to abandon Afghanistan. It's a good thing. It's a good progress, but I think it's not enough. We need to move forward. We need to end the transactional relationship. We need to move forward. We need to recognize the Pakistani interest and the American interest, which, by the way, overlap in Afghanistan in more areas than they do not at this moment. They overlap in more areas than they do not. This is the time actually to clench a deal that would help actually Pakistan and the United States. And this is the time to do it. And maybe the meeting that we saw in Riyadh would be an early sign of a possible progress in the future.
Right. So basically, you are saying that absolutely not was not a very diplomatic statement by the Prime Minister, and many countries would like to see Pakistan and the US fight over Afghanistan. And I agree with you completely, Ahmed, that we need to engage pragmatically with all the countries in the region, and we should end the transactional relations.
I just will not say, I did not say, and I will not say that the Prime Minister, when he said absolutely not, he was undiplomatic. I will not say that because he's the Prime Minister and he knows what he's saying. So right. I'm sure he was not being undiplomatic. He had certain objectives that he wanted to achieve by his statement. All I'm saying is that it's true and it's a good statement politically for him, but it's not. It does not come in the realm of diplomacy, and there is no such thing as absolutely not in diplomacy, and whether it's Pakistan or any other country. And so the Prime Minister knows what he's doing and he knows what he's saying. I'm sure he knows that maybe it's not undiplomatic, but it's a very political statement and he has the right to say it. And he knows what he's trying to achieve. I certainly, as a journalist, as an analyst, can't put myself in a position where I would say that the Prime Minister was undiplomatic. He was not undiplomatic. He used a political statement deliberately, and he was not practicing diplomacy when he said that. He was practicing politics, and he has every right to do that, and he knows what he's doing. All I'm saying is that it's not in the realm of diplomacy, and by that I mean it can change in the future.
Right. Thank you, Ahmed. Hassan, I will come to you now. What do you have to say about the statement about the credibility and reputation of Pakistan? That is why we have been facing problems, according to Ahmed. Do you agree with his assessment? And that we should promote our progress internationally more?
Sure. No, I totally agree with Ahmed. I think he's very eloquently made the case for Pakistan not telling the world its story. And I think we have faltered in educating the world about the progress that we have made over the years. You see, there is a fundamental difference between what you say domestically in your media, for your media houses, statements you make in rallies, and what you are able to project internationally as your accomplishments. And what we have done in the last 1.5, 2 years, specifically in relation to FATF, is something that gives us bragging rights. Literally, we should have made sure that we got space in international media houses. We had our journalists, our policymakers writing op-eds in international media houses. Now, this is something we have not done. And to this extent, I completely agree with Ahmed, and I think he's expressed it very convincingly. But where I have a disagreement with Ahmed, and I'll get to that now, is his statement that the Prime Minister's statement absolutely not is a political statement and not a policy statement. Now, this is where I have a difference of opinion. You see, firstly, the Prime Minister, if you look at his history, his background, he's not a politician. Many reasonable people would agree that the Prime Minister, when he says something, he's saying it, it's an off-the-cuff remark, or he's not thinking in diplomatic terms. When he says something, he, most likely means it. He's not thinking about the diplomatic nuances, the political implications, and all those things. So, when the Prime Minister made this statement, we have to look at the statement in the broader context of what all has been happening to Pakistan in the last 20 plus years. Pakistan has been the victim of the global war on terror. Pakistan has lost its thousands of civilians to the global war on terror. Pakistan has suffered tremendous economic losses because of the global war on terror. So when the Prime Minister makes this statement, it is not a policy, it's not a political statement. It's Pakistan's new policy posture. I find it very difficult to believe that the Prime Minister is making a political statement which can change, once the circumstances get better. No, I don't believe that, because he has stuck to this position, and Pakistan's overtures, Pakistan's interactions with world leaders, with the US recently, lent credence to my belief that Pakistan is making a policy statement, and this is not just a political statement. Now, to what extent Pakistan is going to stick to this policy statement remains to be seen. Now, the meeting that is happening between John Kerry and the Prime Minister, and of course the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, is definitely an icebreaker. I see it as a positive development. Hopefully, it will lead to a thaw in the relations between the US and Pakistan. It will lead to a better understanding. Hopefully, the US will realize that the road to Afghanistan passes through Pakistan. Literally, Pakistan has to be engaged. Pakistan has genuine concerns about Afghanistan, and the fact that Pakistan is probably the one country in the world which can play the most significant role in a post-conflict Afghanistan. So hopefully that will happen. But again, I wouldn't put my money on the meeting happening in the UAE at the moment. It's just an icebreaker, but I don't feel very confident that this is going to lead to something big. Yes, of course, Ahmed made a valid point that there was a time when Trump would tweet against Pakistan, and then he gave the most lavish welcome to Prime Minister Imran Khan. Yes, of course, that happened. But that happened when Pakistan also reached out to the US and gave certain concessions. Now, in relation to Afghanistan, the biggest takeaway, or the biggest thing that the US would want from Pakistan would be, some sort of, overflight rights to be able to carry military and to carry intelligence gathering operations. But in the current political scenario of Pakistan, I don't see Pakistan's Prime Minister backing off from that statement. So to me, it is not a political statement. I feel it is a firm policy position that has been taken by Pakistan. Of course, there would be certain exceptions. Of course, Pakistan can, temper down, this. There can be some exceptions. Pakistan could warm up with the US in the future. Pakistan could give, certain things to the US. But on the whole, I see Pakistan sticking to this position in the future. And the last point that Ahmed made in relation to FATF, that Pakistan has overplayed the Muslim card in relation to FATF. I do agree with him to some extent here. Yes, we have overplayed the victim card. It's not a good idea to be a victim. When you start believing that you're the victim, then you find a convenient scapegoat, and you can blame all that is happening to you on the scapegoat. So it's definitely not a good idea. But comparing the UAE and Iran to Pakistan is perhaps not right, because the UAE is being, I believe that they are under some scrutiny by FATF, but we don't know which way this will go. I mean, they are cooperating with FATF at this point in time, and who knows if they will go on the grey list or not. I doubt it. And in relation to Iran, I have made the point that they have not played the Muslim card as much as we have, but I think in the pecking order of Iranian priorities, FATF is perhaps the lowest. I mean, Iran faces a number of other issues, so it is perhaps not the only problem that Iran is facing at the moment. So yes, Pakistan has perhaps overplayed its, the Muslim card. That would be political in nature, could be our political compulsions. But yes, Pakistan has made progress, and Pakistan has not been able to tell the world about the progress that it has made. And and we have over the years miserably failed to tell the world our story. We do have a beautiful story, if you ask me. In the last 21 years, we have literally risen from the ashes of our funerals, basically. We had been written off. The world had said that Pakistan, is a failed state. To some extent, those allegations still continue to this day. But Pakistan has turned things around, and to that extent, I fully agree with Ahmed that we have not done what we should have done, and there is a lot more that needs to be done by us to tell the world about how we have overcome the challenges that have been thrown our way, and how we have literally survived in the worst of circumstances, and to also tell the world that we are no pariah state. We want to be as much a part of the international community as any other developed country, for example. So to that extent, we have really not done much. And I'm hoping that, through more stability in our country, through better relations with America, with China, and, other countries, we should hopefully be able to tell the world our story and to, turn this around in the future.
All right. So, Hassan, you were saying that the statement by Prime Minister Imran Khan was not a political statement, and you believe that he will not back down from this position. Secondly, you agree with Ahmed that Pakistan has indeed overplayed the victim card when it comes to FATF. So, going forward, what do you suggest? How do we deal with the issue of FATF?
No, so I think what Ahmed also mentioned earlier, I agree with him. We need to comply with the requirements. We need to double down on our efforts. If we have complied with 26 out of 27 requirements, that means we are left with one. We just need to double down. We need to make sure that we tick all the boxes.
But some people are saying that they will, keep on adding items to the list. They will keep on increasing it. Do you agree?
So it's possible. And again, this is the point Ahmed made where I slightly disagree with him. He said that FATF is not a political body. There could be lobbying, but it's not political, or something along the lines. He made a statement. I do feel that FATF is political. FATF is very political. If states lobby, they lobby for a certain reason, and they push to get to accomplish their goals, whatever they are trying to do. Now, he's absolutely right that we should not think that or believe or blame that India has done this. Of course, they are not capable enough to do that. Yes, they have been one of the reasons why Pakistan, why countries have started, looking at Pakistan a certain negative way. They are one of the triggering factors behind that, but they are not the reason why we have landed in FATF. They don't have that much of a clout. They are not that important. So that much is, I agree with. But in relation to, after we have landed in the grey list, it is, and the fact that we are managing to stay in the grey list is purely because of, geopolitics and geopolitical reasons. There is absolutely no reason. But how do we get out of this? Unfortunately, we have no choice but to play by the international rule book. We need to speak the language of the law. We need to fulfill the requirements of FATF. If FATF tells us that, you have done, whatever you've done, you need to take certain more steps, or you need to comply with X, Y, Z, then we have to engage FATF in an argument. Or when I say argument, I'm not talking about like a verbal fight. I mean, you have to argue your case. You have to build a case. You have to explain why we are complying with the requirements. If they say that you have not done something, then you have to reason it out. So basically, we will have to play by the international playbook if we are to exit the FATF fairness.
Ahmed, would you like to respond to Hassan's comments?
Yeah, Qudsiya, you mean the comments on the FATF? Hassan's comments on FATF?
Yes.
Right. Well, I agree and disagree both with Hassan. Why? Because basically, it's not politicized and it's not a political forum. There is no direct evidence of that. There is no statement by any country saying we've taken this position at FATF because we don't like that country for another reason. Nobody has said that. None of the FATF meeting minutes include statements by any of the participants who made a relation or correlation between what the FATF is doing, let's say, with regards to Pakistan or the UAE or Iran or Turkey or any other country, and linked to any other political issues. So I will not say that this is a politicized forum. Yes, we can have a number of analyses, any number of analyses and theories as to what could be the possibilities of countries using this forum to effect change on a policy that has really nothing to do with the FATF or financial system, but it's a geostrategic issue. For example, with regards to Pakistan, if FATF is really being used not because of Pakistan problems in Pakistan's financial system, but it's actually because of Pakistan's position with regards to a number of things, absolutely not, or Afghanistan or whatever. So you cannot make a definitive, direct correlation. There's no evidence to that yet, but yes, I can always sit and say a certain country's voting patterns in the UN Security Council is really not about international law, it's about its own interests. Obviously countries take that into consideration, but at least in FATF, they don't say it openly. I can't openly sit, this cannot be a strategy for me to sit in FATF and complain and say, you people are being biased, you're using this platform for political reasons, you're politicized. Really, if they're politicized, do you have an evidence that really shows that this is that the decision taken is really because of politics? Because if I go to the last decision taken by the FATF on keeping Pakistan on the grey list, yes, we have a strong case. Yes, we did not argue it very well and did not promote it. And also, yes, that the FATF has concerns with regards to our past record and reputation. And they want stronger guarantees that we will not relapse, like we did on a number of occasions and times before. That to me sounds like a very smart, if they are being biased and they're using that platform for politics for other reasons, then they are really very, very smart. Because they're using actual laws and standards and rules of the FATF that everybody agrees on, that they are right and correct rules, and they're applying them on Pakistan's case. and it's up to us to lobby and show that where we stand now in meeting the requirements is enough, that you can trust us, that we will continue moving forward and we will not relapse. That's up to us to show. Obviously, when somebody is sitting in an FATF meeting and watches and reads the news about Islamabad, and there are all these stories about the possibility of the Prime Minister not completing his term, of the government instability, of rallies coming to Islamabad to dislodge the government, of possibility that these laws may not sustain, and nobody gets confident to say, yes, we are satisfied, let's take you off the gray list. We need to provide guarantees. We have a problem with reputation. We have a problem both with reputation with regards to the past, and we have a problem with promoting what we have already done. Now, we've done a lot of things which will sustain, but have we explained it internationally, what we've done that really will sustain, whether the current government stays, goes, or whatever happens, that whatever changes we brought to the Pakistani financial system are long-lasting? I haven't seen a single effort by the government really to try to calm and target these arguments. These are the arguments that are used actually at the FATF to sustain Pakistan's listing in the gray list. That's what we need to target, and I don't think we're targeting them.
Right. Ahmed and Hassan, I thank both of you for your time and analysis. Let's hope and we pray, all Pakistanis are praying that our Prime Minister makes the right decision when it comes to FATF and giving airspace to the US. We have a few young activists with us. Shahid Raza is a security analyst and I've invited him to speak. I think we should also get some of his views. Hassan, do you want to give some concluding remarks so I can give the mic to Shahid?
No, I just, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for organizing this. Thanks to Ahmed and, the other gentleman who was there before Ahmed. I forgot his name. Thank you very much. I found this session to be very informative and I look forward to participating in future sessions as well. Thank you so much. And thanks to all the listeners, of course.
Thank you, Hassan. Ahmed, do you want to give your concluding remarks?
Not really. I just wanted to thank you and very informative and thank you to Hassan as well.
Okay, and I'll give the mic to Shahid. Shahid, what are your comments on this latest developments, these two latest developments actually?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Thank you for inviting me, Qudsiya. Assalamu alaikum, Hassan. I will not take a lot of your time. I'm just going to make two brief comments. I don't see the issue of quote-unquote absolutely not, aka offering military bases or logistical support to the U.S. military or U.S. intelligence services and FATF. They are basically two geopolitical issues. They are not legal issues. They are not economic issues. They are not bilateral issues or multilateral issues. They are basically geopolitical issues. They feed into the contemporary geopolitics that is happening in our region. And Pakistan seems to be on the left side of the current geopolitical scenario that is taking shape in our region, especially in the Pacific region. So I don't think that Pakistan would have taken a clear position on offering or extending rights to bases for, let's face it, for CIA, basically, in Pakistan. So CIA has been based in Pakistan before, so it's not something that, would have kind of broken a trend, so to speak. It would not have been a trend-setting development for CIA to have bases in Pakistan. They've had bases in the past, in the 60s. They've had bases in Balochistan as well during the war on terror. So it would have been a continuation of a client state mentality on the behalf of Pakistan if we continued to offer those facilities to the US. But let me take it back to 2005. In 2005, the US and Pakistan relations, they kind of reached rock bottom when the US decided to sign a strategic cooperation deal with India that involved several types of cooperation that upset the balance of power between Pakistan and India. It puts India at a strategic advantage vis-a-vis Pakistan. Pakistan sees that as a threat, continues to see that as a threat, and I would say rightfully so. Then Americans and the Indians have signed several other agreements, especially regarding the exchange of logistical bases and intelligence sharing. So in this context, Pakistan feels that it is not being treated like it should have been treated by the US for the amount of cooperation we extended to the Americans before and after the war on terror. So, and there has been a lack of interest in Washington as well to kind of mend fences with Pakistan and have a practical working relationship with Pakistan. So because of these factors and because of America's pivot towards India, because India is apparently assisting the US in containing China, which it may or may not be doing, but that's what the Americans think. That is what their perception is, right? So in this context, Pakistan does not feel the need to offer any basing facilities to the Americans because there is a very simple reason. When we had offered basing facilities to the Americans back in the 60s, it came with some very serious consequences for Pakistan. 1971 would have been one of those consequences. There were a very limited number of people who know that there was a lot of animosity between Islamabad and Moscow back in the day. So much so that Moscow actually, after the U-2 incident happened, and by the way, the U-2 that was shot down by, flown by Gary Powers, that was shot down in Russia, it actually took off from Peshawar. So Pakistan was offering a base for American espionage activity against Soviet Union. And after this incident, the Russians actually summoned the Pakistani ambassador, and he was taken to a table where there was a map of the region, and the Russian official, he marked Peshawar with a red marker. In that context, it means that Peshawar is deemed as a nuclear target in Cold War politics. That's what it means. So there are always consequences of having foreign military bases on your soil. So Pakistan has learned there is a context to this. Absolutely not. It is not a spontaneous, emotional, image-driven decision that the Prime Minister might have taken overnight in his bedroom. That's not how state policy works. It's a calculated decision on the behalf of the Pakistani state. It would have been thought after for months. All stakeholders would have been consulted, and it's a decision that the Pakistani state is willing to make. And obviously, it would come at a cost. The Americans are not happy with us. They think that Pakistan is not cooperating, and as I've already explained, why Pakistan is not cooperating, because we see their cooperation with India as a threat. United States has completely failed to balance its South Asia strategy. They feel that they can use India and Pakistan against each other, rather than actually trying to create balance in the region. So it is a complete failure on the part of the American policy. It has nothing to do with Pakistan. Second, the FATF issue is, I think I've said it on one of the discussions before. I had a meeting with when the FATF issue originally took off. I had a meeting with a former economist, Pakistani economist from the World Bank in late 2018, when we had the first roundtable to discuss the FATF issue and its implications and all that. So the economist, I'm not going to name, told me that you are not going to be removed from the grey list. You are not going to be put on the blacklist as well. The objective here is to strong arm Pakistan into submission economically. This is basically economic warfare. And what they're trying to do is that they are trying to strong arm Pakistan into accepting certain policy decisions that Washington wants to impose on Pakistan, because those decisions otherwise in normal conditions would not be acceptable to the Pakistani state. So they are creating internal pressure. They are creating external pressure. It is also believed by certain quarters that the escalation in 2019 between Pakistan and India, which was basically initiated by India, was also inspired by the American policy. A revocation of Article 370 was also American policy. They are creating a regional environment that is completely hostile to Pakistan in order to force Pakistan into a situation where we are willing to, yield and do certain things that the Americans want us to do, not only with regards to Afghanistan, but also with regards to Iran and China, because these two countries are a big threat to the American interests. And Pakistan is sandwiched in the middle, and you couldn't ask for a better location if you were to, kind of conduct some hairy business in Iran or in China. So Pakistan understands the situation from a geosecurity perspective, and the economic cost that we are paying in terms of FATF, it is understood. It is fair to comply at this point, as Hassan has already very eloquently explained. In my mindset, I believe that even if you meet 120% of the requirements that FATF has set, they're not going to remove you from the grey list, because that is not the purpose. The purpose of forums like the International Criminal Court or the International War Crimes Tribunal or the FATF or certain other forums is basically, these forums are meant for black and brown countries. The Americans very conveniently gave complete immunity to their soldiers from being prosecuted for war crimes in Afghanistan at the International Tribunal. I mean, that kind of destroys the entire facade of International War Crime Tribunal. I mean, why do you have it in the first place if white countries are not going to be held accountable? I mean, if the British are not going to be held accountable, the Australians are not going to be held accountable, or the Americans are not going to be held accountable. I mean, why do you have them in the first place? It is to basically, bully countries like Pakistan, like other countries, African countries, and all that, to manage them, right? So FATF is one of those international. It's an instrument of the international establishment. It's not an independent, apolitical, bona fide organization that just trying to get the world, trying to get rid of the financial crimes or terror financing and all that all over the world. That is not true, because if that were true, the Americans are supporting terrorist organizations today as we speak. They are funding terrorist organizations right now. They will never end up on a grey list, right? They are funding quote-unquote moderate opposition in South America. They are trying to overthrow certain governments in South America. They're trying to overthrow governments in the Middle East. They're supporting rebels and militants and terrorists in Syria as well, in Iraq as well. Wherever they can, people that can manage their affairs or help them out on the battlefield, reduce American casualties, they're supporting them, right? They are never going to end up on a grey list, because that funding of militants is justified in the American context because they are exceptional. The international law does not apply to them. So it kind of, to me, it is, we have the wrong end of the discussion. These instruments have no credibility whatsoever. They are basically instruments to force small countries, developing countries, into submission. And
So, Shahid, what is the bottom line? How should Pakistan deal with it?
Look, there are two ways you can do it. First of all, so far I've explained that this is a geopolitical problem, right? The solution is also geopolitical. So, in order to deal with the geopolitical situation, you have to develop levers. You have to have leverage that you can trade, right? So first thing you can do is there are two basic options that Pakistan have in my point of view. Number one, you can go for a de-escalation. So what I mean by de-escalation is that you bend the knee in front of the US and you'll tell them, okay, here are the bases, go bomb the Afghans. We are also switching the tabs on the Chinese. We are going against the Iranians. We are also going against the Russians. Support us and, we'll become your mercenaries and we'll do whatever you want. And, try to help you save your fledgling world order, right? That is one thing you can do. Second option you have is what the current government is following. That is an honorable but very expensive option. That option is you stand your ground, you tell them to, mind their own business. You don't cooperate where you don't cooperate on your own terms, right? And at the same time, you take certain escalatory steps that will give you the leverage that you can trade on international forums, right? International forum. When I say international forums, I'm talking about quote-unquote strategic dialogue. I'm not talking about public diplomatic forums. No real business is conducted on diplomatic forums. It happens behind the scenes. So you need to increase your leverage. You need to intensify CPAC. You need to intensify cooperation with the Chinese. You need to intensify cooperation with the Russians. You need to intensify the regional connectivity that is taking place in Eurasia. If it is going to happen in 2030, make sure it happens in 2025. Accelerate the catalyst role of Pakistan in the regional integration, because that is a clear and visible threat to the American world order in the region. Second step you can take, you'll have to escalate against India. You have to ensure that everything India does has a cost. There is a cost imposed on India every time it does something against China. We have to consistently make India believe that it is stuck in a 2.5 front war scenario. It is in this context you will have the leverage to basically, negotiate on FATF, to negotiate on, nuclear supplies group, to negotiate on the IMET or the CSF or a lot of the other, impending issues that exist between the Americans and Pakistan. They are only going to recognize you when you have the leverage. If you bend your knee, they are going to give you peanuts. They're going to use your blood. They will use you to, basically, they will do exactly what you've done in the Cold War. If we haven't learned lessons from the Cold War, we destroyed our society. We introduced radicalization. We introduced, several different types of vectors that do not belong to our society. So we are still paying the price, right? So I feel that in a longer strategic sense, forgive me for saying this, Qudsiya, but there are several things I can't say on the public forum as far as escalation is concerned. We can escalate on 10 different fronts. What Pakistan has going for itself is that it is so strategically located that if we move a finger to the west, things happen in the west. If we move a finger to the east, things happen in the east. We have that capacity. All we have to do is strategically leverage our position and maneuver Pakistan in a position where Americans feel that Pakistan is unavoidable. Pakistan is fait accompli. If they are going to have to conduct business in South Asia, they have to sit down with Pakistan. They have to level things off with Pakistan. If they don't, any of their interests in South Asia and in Central Asia are not going to be serviced.
Do you see our current leadership capable of doing that?
Look, I feel that Pakistan's leadership is perfectly capable of doing that. This is exactly what they have been doing. Like I said, it is not a decision that any one person can make over a coffee table. These decisions are war games in think tanks. They are red teamed. They are basically, put through the paces. They are understood at a theoretical and practical level, and then they are implemented. There is a process to how think tanks work, how policy works, right? So I believe that at least, okay, so let me just boil it down, right? The intent does exist. With the current government, the intent does exist that they want to do this, right? But at the same time, there is going to be cost. There's going to be inflation. There's going to be forex manipulation. There's going to be, international market manipulation. There's going to be economic pressure. So you have to take that decision if you want to become a mercenary client state of the Americans all over again, or you want to take the risk and maybe become a sovereign state 15 years down the track. That is the strategic mindset we need to go with. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahid.
Just two things I will say. First, from a state communications perspective, when a prime minister speaks at a public forum, be it an interview or anything else in an official capacity, it is seen as state policy. And a prime minister will not make a statement spontaneously. They only release information that has been agreed upon, or the information that actually want to put out in the public domain or in the international domain. So that is one concept I want to clear from a STRATCOM perspective. Second element is talk about China. I sent out several tweets about China a few days ago, and a lot of my friends were a bit perplexed by what I was trying to say. Look, Pakistan is being squeezed like a lemon from all sides by the Americans. They are doing it because they are imposing cost on Pakistan for aligning with the Eurasian alliance, so to speak, if it exists, especially China, right? So it is China's responsibility to support Pakistan economically. If they do not do that, then a time will come when Pakistan, it will become unsustainable for Pakistan to, sustain the pressure, the economic pressure that is being imposed on Pakistan because of its alliance with China. We are assisting China on some very important issues. We are giving China access to the Indian Ocean through the Arabian Sea. That is a very important respite for China, especially because of its Malacca Straits dilemma. China has $1 trillion trading economy, and if its naval access is blocked in case of hostilities from the Strait of Malacca by the U.S. Navy, which is currently deploying 60% of its naval forces to the Indo-Pacific region, and it is indeed a possibility that China could face a naval blockade in case of a crisis. The other will give China a very strategic advantage in order to, continue to trade with the rest of the world, bypassing the Malacca Straits. So we have to understand the true importance of the other in a geopolitical sense, right? So, and this is exactly why Pakistan is being imposed with economic pressure. So it falls down to China to ensure that Pakistan's economy does not tank. Because if it does, then Pakistan will have to make hard choices. So the way things are going in Pakistan economically, for example, China should actually be mobilizing it. It is China's responsibility. I'm not saying that China should provide aid to Pakistan, but Hassan is here. He can explain a few things about this. There are several things China can do without providing direct aid to Pakistan that can alleviate the economic pressure on Pakistani markets right now. Okay, so if China, it depends if China attaches enough priority with the CPAC. I mean, it can't be that we are being squeezed by the West dry, basically, from all sides, and China is asleep on the wheel. So because when you sign a strategic cooperation deal with a country, you have to bear the cost, right? Because it is going to be expensive. Nobody is going to allow you to change the geopolitical dynamics that they have put in place after fighting 2 world wars, right? So you have to understand where it comes from and how important it is. You are basically trying to write the future. You're trying to correct the trajectory of Asia's future by invoking these projects that will connect countries geo-economically and from a geosecurity perspective. So in the next 10 to 15 years, the Eurasian area, these countries like China, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Russia, and Central Asian countries they are going to be much different countries. They are not going to be the countries of yesterday. They are going to be countries that will be more integrated. Because this region, let's face it, does not have a history of, let's say, Europe, right? There has been no world wars. Large-scale conflict hasn't taken place in 30 years in the region. So there is a possibility that the region can be connected, and you will have the same amount of GDP as the European Union. That poses a threat to the Western order, right? But I will repeat this. Pakistan, we can't do this, right? So it falls down to China to read the situation correctly and to take measures to ensure that Pakistan, the pressure that is being imposed, the cost that is being imposed on Pakistan is mitigated, right? China can and should help Pakistan at FATF. China has enormous diplomatic muscle, has enormous economic muscle. It has a lot of say on international forums. It can and should actively lobby to get Pakistan off the hook from FATF. It can do that if it wants.
Okay, Shahid, you are saying that China should support Pakistan, but I don't think it's a good strategy to confine Pakistan to one camp. We should not antagonize any major regional power. And don't you think?
That alignment has already been drawn.
This is something we need to talk about, because I hear some analysts saying that it's the establishment which wants to, develop relations with Israel. What do you have to say about that, Shahid?
I think the opinion of the Pakistani state about Israel has been very clear. There is absolutely no ambiguity. And we should not listen to, I would say, ignorant opinions coming from quarters that clearly have vested interests. Pakistan, I wrote an article for The Independent several months ago about Israel. My opinion is very clear. Israel is an illegitimate apartheid state. We should never recognize it unless and until there's a viable Palestinian state. Period. It's not up for negotiations. If Pakistan is ever to recognize an Israeli state, it has to be done in conjunction with a sovereign, viable Palestinian state, a two-state solution. That is what Pakistan is committed to, and we are not going to change we have not changed our opinion for the 70 years, even when the Arab countries have, Egypt signed the Camp David Agreement. Turkey has recognized Israel. So Pakistan has not changed its opinion, regardless of what has happened. And we should not, because it's based on principles. It's not something that we benefit politically from. As a matter of fact, we will benefit politically if we do the opposite. If we recognize the Zionist occupation of the Palestinian lands, if we endorse the human rights abuses that they have been carrying out in the occupied territories, we will benefit economically. We will benefit at the international level. We will benefit from more advanced military technology, etc. But we have to ask ourselves if those those things, those rewards are worth it. And if you want to again, as I said, if you want to become a mercenary client state or you want to become an independent state, that is the decision you have to take.
Right. Hassan, now I have received a statement. It's more like a commentary. It's not a question, from Huram Chuktai, and he's saying that it is absolutely incorrect that Pakistan is in compliance with FATF recommendations. There are three different steps and approaches to adhere to FATF. Pakistan has complied with legal reforms and institutional requirements, but practically Pakistan is weak of risk-based FATF adherence. Pakistan is not dealing with FATF with a professionally sound approach. The FABU and financial intelligence framework is cosmetic. And he's saying that these are few things the Pakistani lawyer can see on the face of it. How can one expect that FATF assessments are exclusively influenced diplomatically? What do you have to say to him?
You see, this is, firstly, thank you to Puram for his comment. This is a very long and a very lengthy debate. I think I've explained my point of view earlier, that Pakistan has fulfilled majority of the requirements of FATF, and Pakistan is faced with what I've called a shifting goalpost. You see, the laws and the requirements of FATF, as I've explained earlier, are the result of certain UNSC resolutions, and the laws that I have seen, the provisions that I've gone through, I found them to be very subjective in nature. So when it comes to requiring a country to comply with them, the entity that is going to finally decide on whether or not Pakistan has complied can very easily say that you have not complied, because this is what it means. It's becoming, in my view, an endless game of chicken and mouse, which I've discussed earlier. In relation to the specific points that Forum has made, I'll be more than happy to discuss them. But this is a very, very lengthy debate because then we have to go into the nitty-gritties of each and every submission that Pakistan has made, FATF's objections to those, Pakistan's counter submissions. So it's a very lengthy debate.
Yes, I think he joined us late and he has missed your earlier analysis.
Yeah, and look, and as you all would have seen earlier, I did admit that Pakistan was caught napping by FATF. Pakistan woke up very late. Pakistan, we have unfortunately a national habit of doing things at the last minute. We love last minute scrambles. We feel that they are the best way of doing things, but unfortunately they are not. We had taken this seriously from the very start. In fact, if we had not done the things which landed us in the FATF grey list in the first place, I think that would have been ideal. But the blame for that lies, in my view, with the previous governments, that came before 2018, which landed Pakistan as this disaster in this deep, mess. And in my view, again, Forum is entitled to his views, but in my view, Pakistan has demonstrated substantial compliance. Pakistan has taken positive steps to comply with FATF, and now it has become very visible, to me. And this opinion of mine has been shaped in the last 6 months. Those who have read my articles in the past would, recall that I have taken Pakistan to the cleaners, where I blame Pakistan for its shortcomings. But in the last 6-7 months, I've been forced to change my opinion after looking at Pakistan's progress, the steps that Pakistan has taken. And, I do feel that Pakistan has been left in a maze, in a room full of mirrors where Pakistan doesn't know where to go. It's become very unfortunate because, you see, as I mentioned earlier, Qudsiya, that if transparency was to be applied, if the rules were applied fairly and justly, then I can name, many countries, which deserve to be on the FATF grey list. I mean, we know it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that TBI, Cayman Islands, and even, world prominent global capitals like London are, countries where cities where, ill-gotten wealth is parked, which are hubs of transnational crimes, but nothing is happening to them. So these things do make me question the bona fides of FATF. If FATF was a fair organization, then I would love to see some other countries also on the FATF list. If Pakistan is to be blamed, then let's also be fair and put other countries on the grey list. So I conclude with somewhat of a heavy heart. Again, this sounds to some like conspiracy theory, but let me conclude this after my studying FATF and Pakistan's hard work, that yes, Pakistan is being scapegoated, Pakistan is being targeted, and yes, indeed, there are geopolitical reasons why this is happening. If somebody tells me that FATF is, a glorious institution, where legal rules are upheld, where laws are applied transparently, where, the principle of audi album part, which basically means hear the other side, let's get evidence, where the proceedings are transparent, then, I would beg to differ with them, because the reality is very different from this. It's become a hub of lobbying where countries are being targeted. So yes, I do disagree with Forum, but I'm happy to discuss with him later on a one-to-one level. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Shahid, you want to say something?
I would just appreciate Hassan. He's a good friend, and I would like to appreciate you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for your time, Shahid, and for your wonderful analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to all the listeners.
All the listeners. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Bye-bye.
Wa alaikum assalam.